Hey everyone, welcome to the Vienna Whyte Roundtable Season 1, Episode 12. I'm your host, Millie Rouge from the band Vienna Whyte. This roundtable is a YEG music production, and today we have 3 guests with me today. I'm just going to quickly introduce them before we start off. So Ange, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Ange Caroline. I'm a musician, singer-songwriter, working out of the Edmonton area. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here today and talk to you guys.
Beautiful. And Leigh?
Hi, I'm Leigh Detsom, Edmonton area. I have some singer-songwriter solo stuff that I do, but mainly I have a band called House of Pines. It's an alternative metal band, and we're playing a lot of local shows, typically in the capital region.
Beautiful. And Bethel, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hey, my name is Bethel, and I also am a musician. I'm also a spoken word artist, and I'm in a band with my friend Sid Hart called Basque, which mixes spoken word and music. And I also curate and founded this show called Raw Voices.
Beautiful. So we have some very exciting people on today. I'm super excited about the variety of our guests. And I think it's really cool to have all different types of guests because we really get to draw from our different experiences, and it really tells different sides of each story. So what I want to do today is I just want to start, I kind of want to talk to you, Bethel, first, because you're someone brand new to me, and I first met you today. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the work that you do. I think it's really, really cool. I actually found Bethel through Instagram, so that's how we kind of connected ourselves. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Raw Voices program that you kind of curated. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Raw Voices is? And if I were to come to Calgary, let's say tomorrow, not that I would, but if I could, what would I want to know about Raw Voices?
So essentially, it's meant to be an eclectic showcase of spoken word, comedy, and music. So we have features of each element, and we also have open mics, and we usually open up 10, sometimes 15 spots for open mics, and we do them monthly. So it's always every last Friday of the month, and we've been hosting it at Loco's Lounge. And it started in July 2016, and honestly, it was supposed to just be like a one-time thing because we had a one-time opportunity to do it. But then a lot of people were like, oh, this is really great. Like, is there going to be one next month? And we were like, oh, we didn't plan on it, but I guess we'll have one next month. And we had a lot of positive feedback and realized its importance in like the growing art scene in Calgary, especially for like young students or like marginalized groups that sometimes don't feel represented in these spaces. And it was also a way to like let people, like I feel like, especially as a student, I couldn't make all these different shows, like all these spoken word shows or comedy shows, or I'm not really like, if I'm not someone that really knows the art scene, it kind of gives you a little bit of everything. Yeah. So it's not like all spoken word or all music or all comedy. Yeah. And we've been running that ever since.
That's really cool. I really admire that open mic theme you guys have, because I know in Edmonton we have quite a few open mics in general. A lot of them are very orientated toward music, though. I know there might be 1 or 2 that are maybe spoken word, but I think that's really cool that you guys incorporate like comedy and music and spoken word. Like, I think that's really, really unique. So you said you're a musician yourself. Is that kind of how you got into wanting to start up this open mic program, or how did you kind of get to where you wanted to start it up?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely started in music as a kid, but in high school, I delved more into spoken word, and I feel like that's more of what I perform. If I do perform gigs and stuff these days, it's definitely spoken word gigs. Yeah. So I made this platform for like poets and musicians, especially to collaborate, and comedians I feel like are really placed in their own sphere. And I feel like sometimes with spoken word, it could delve into really heavy topics, and comedy is a good way to lighten the mood. But in my band, Basque, that's where we mix spoken word and music. Cool. So that's where like 2 of those meet.
Yeah. I don't think I've honestly ever seen a band do spoken word. So that's like really, really cool. I'm going to have to check out your band profile if you guys have your stuff on social media.
Yes, we do.
Cool. I'll have to check it out because I'm really interested to see that kind of blend of it. Now, I kind of have a question about Calgary, the Calgary scene in itself. What would you say is currently thriving in Calgary, like either music genre wise or art wise? Like, what do you think is really kind of taking the force right now in Calgary? I know it's kind of always ever changing, but what do you find is really popular in Calgary right now?
I find like indie and folk music really popular. I mean, it really depends who you talk to, because I know a lot of people that do a lot of hip hop as well, and I've seen a lot of that, and I've seen a lot of talented hip hop artists. But I also see like a lot of spoken word. I feel like it really depends who you're talking to. For me, I find the comedy community is pretty small. From just like finding features and stuff, and I feel like I literally never run out of musicians, especially in the indie acoustic folk
singer
type genre.
songwriter. Totally, yeah. There's always a plentiful of that for sure. And my last question for you before I move on to another guest here, what kind of tips would you give to someone who maybe has never tried an open mic, that might be a little bit worried or like a little bit wary to try it? What kind of tips would you give them just to go out there?
I'd say that like if you don't go to an open mic with a supportive crowd, it's like so unlikely. Like I think that it's just go and do it, and you're always going to be nervous, and just go and put yourself out there. And I always say it's better to do like 30 seconds than no seconds, like maybe dip your toes before you do the full 5-minute song. You know, you could do an excerpt. But yeah, if the crowd is not supportive, regardless if you butcher it or you kill it, like that's not a good crowd. Like I feel like all open mic crowds should be like the most supportive people in the world, and they usually are. So don't be scared. You know, you'll I mean, it's hard to not be scared, but you know, take the chance, and you'll never know until you try. So.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's the beauty of open mics, is that they're super friendly. Majority of them are very super friendly. Like even the few times I've seen people like maybe make an accident or like a little goof up, like people do not care. They go to the open mics with the intention that it's not going to be Beyonce's everywhere that are stepping up. So I think that's important to remember too. Now, Ange, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about your musical journey here in Edmonton. Can you tell us a little bit kind of how you started and where you're at today, and how you kind of got to point A to point B?
Yeah, for sure. My music career is still relatively new, if you can even call it a music career. Because like I'm a high school student right now, so I've been trying to like balance that for a while, and I've only been actively gigging for like a year really, and it all really happened super unexpectedly. It all started, I was talking to this guy, Jesse Lipscomb, you guys might know him. He's an actor from the Edmonton area. He was behind the like #MakeItAwkward movement, and I was at an event that he was talking at, and I had the chance to chat with him, and I told him I was a musician, and then he asked like, where can I find your music online? I said, you can't find it online, like I'm not that far yet. And then he basically like told me right there, like by the end of this week I want your music online. So I did exactly that. I just like cleaned up like this mix I had of a song I had, and then by the end of the week it was up, and through that I started talking to like other musicians in the Edmonton music scene, and that's how I got involved with Yeg music and things like that. So yeah, that happened like less than a year ago at this point, and since then I've been gigging and yeah, just so much more involved in the music scene, and I'm so grateful for that to have happen. Yeah,
it's really cool.
So that's kind of how it's going right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to chat because you did a festival, I think it was last year, the year before, called Amplify. Can you tell us a little about that festival in Edmonton and kind of what it's like?
Yeah, for sure. So it happens in St. Albert, and I've been involved with it for like so long now. The first time I ever actually like played in front of an audience was at the festival when I was 13 or 14, so like a long time ago. And then I got involved with helping plan and run the whole festival about 3 years ago now. And we just do like so many different things. We have the actual festival that happens every year in October. It's 2 days. We have concerts and workshops and so many different things for artists at like every level of their career. So a lot of development opportunities and things like that. And I'm just so grateful to have been part of it, because that's really what like gave me the confidence to really put myself out there and share what I've been doing with everyone. So yeah,
I really love that program, because I think it's super inspiring for the youth, because I don't think there's a lot of resources for the youth to really get from like that point of like, okay, I want to take this music a little bit more seriously, but I'm not fully ready to, you know, like put on a completely live show by myself, right? So I think like the opportunities like Bethel does with like open mics and like festivals such as Amplify, they're super crucial, because they really help encourage the youth to really try and expand and test it out and see if it's for them, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
music sometimes might not always be for everybody. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's for sure what I like love so much about like amplifying things like that is like
Yeah.
the every step. Because like when I first played when I was 13, I played like the acoustic stage, which was like a 10-minute set. It was, and I was terrified, but like I did it. And we offer like things like that all the way up to like, you know, like a full-on hour-long concert at night. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Super cool. What made you want to apply to the festival and kind of start volunteering with it? Like what kind of ways did you get involved with that?
Yeah, at first, I got involved the year after I first played,
Okay.
and it was just Kathleen, who's the festival coordinator. She just reached out to me, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to help plan this? We're always looking for youth to help out." I was like, "Yeah, this is cool." And at first, it was like nothing too serious, but as the years went on, and I just really got this connection with it, and I got to see the impact it was having on other youth. That I just, yeah, like I said, really like found a connection with Amplify, and yeah, that's how it started.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And Leigh, I want to finish off with you today. I want to talk a little bit more about, can you kind of tell us a journey of how your band kind of came to be? Because I know you guys have kind of a history of your band. So I'm kind of curious for our audience to hear a little bit more about House of Pines.
Yeah, absolutely. I had always had a vision for the kind of band that I wanted to be a part of. I'd always thought I would start the band. It's basically post-grunge, alternative metal, hard rock, depending on what kind of listener you are. We could be metal, we could be hard rock, that sort of thing. But the main vision is a band that's by artists for artists. So the art comes first. That's what we're really passionate about. Making art. I like to say sometimes we make music that's difficult to listen to. That's our goal. So we want people to partake in that experience of the art. But at the same time, we're still accessible in terms of modern song formats. Sort of a lot of our songs are sort of bridge, verse, chorus, that sort of format. But so we've been around since 2015. That's when we really got active. We were practicing a little bit before that. And we played about between 5 and 8 shows a year. So but yeah, it's been an awesome journey. The three of us get along better than anyone we know, really. So,
and that's super important for a band. I've had experience with that, so it's super important to have. This actually kind of ties into what you were talking about, how I was curious to know, do you think metal has an age limit to it? And if you do, why or why not? Or if you don't?
that's a great question, actually. Of course, we would like to think that we're timeless, but I think I would like to see the metal, or I like to think of the metal community as evolving over the years. For example, it started out as classic metal. It morphed into harder forms of metal, sort of your hardcore, your metalcore. And then somewhere in there, post-grunge started to exist, and then we've got metal that's inspired by that. I mean, of course, that's a very simplistic sort of history, but what we're finding, or what we found, is that metal's changed as the listeners change. So our target audience, because our kind of music was really popular from like 98 to 2005, we're finding that those people, they've grown older. Now they're in their 30s and 40s. They've got kids. Their tastes have changed. So we're trying to figure out, how do we attract the fans that might be new to sort of the alternative metal and hard rock genre. So it's a difficult question to answer. Is it timeless? I'd like to think so, but it depends who you talk to, right? Who the listener is.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the really things I kind of admire about metal, is it's such an interesting genre. And it doesn't please to everyone, obviously, but I think that's the really cool part, is that it's difficult. And I think to really accomplish that, and I think the artists that do really succeed, it's really inspiring to see kind of how they've really incorporated everybody to like their music, or to have some sort of interest. So what would you say with having a metal band? What would you say has been maybe the most challenging part about it?
I think it's what I've alluded to before, is understanding that the kind of music I love and want to make, the fans they're older, they've got kids, they've got so many competing priorities. We know our target demographic is in there, so we're figuring out new ways to reach those fans. We've found quite a few, but we want to find more, obviously, and the whole goal is to get the art to the people that will love it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And those people can be very difficult to find. So I'm doing a lot of exploration right now, actually, into marketing and how to reach people. So I'd say that's the most challenging thing, really, is figuring out how to properly market ourselves as a metal band. And I think most musicians can identify with that anyway, regardless of the genre. So
yeah, well, that's what I was actually going to say. And I imagine for even people like Ange or Bethel, you probably still have troubles with your own genres and trying to figure out, you know, kind of your audience and who you really reach to. And I know for myself as a musician, like I do have a pretty more basic category of indie pop, which is very, very common amongst most young generations. But I find even then it's still hard to find the exact genre and the exact kind of style that will really stick with people, that they'll actually take my song and save it. Because it's very rare sometimes I find that, you know, you can listen to another artist, be like, wow, your music's really cool, but in your own head you're kind of like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to download that, because that's not really like my style of listening that I normally listen to on an average daily basis. But I think I think it's super challenging. So I actually want to talk about now our topic of the day, because this has kind of come up in all of your conversations, which I found very, very interesting. This is really what I was hoping to talk about this topic. Now I want to talk about overcoming fear as an artist. Now, I think you all have a little bit of pieces of this that you could all kind of talk about with all of your individual experiences. So again, this conversation is meant to be as open as possible, and whatever kind of resonates with you, please feel free to chat about. But I like to kind of focus in on one topic of our conversation for the chat to really expand on. So again, this can be in your own experience or maybe through other people that you've met or anything like that. So I'm curious to know, and anyone can go ahead and start first if they feel they want to talk about this. What steps in the past have maybe you guys taken to overcome fear and anxiety before you kind of got to that point of comfortability where you were able to perform or to be on stage for open mics? What kind of steps have you guys taken?
I can go, I guess. Yeah, I think fear and like being anxious and things is just like a universal challenge for like performing artists, and like whether it's comedy or spoken word or music or whatever. And like especially in the beginning. And I think really like the thing is you just kind of got to try it and put yourself out there, like Bethel said earlier. You know, you're never going to know until you try it. And you know, once you do it more often, you get more comfortable with it. And like really the worst thing that's going to happen is like maybe you mess up or whatever, but it's really no big deal, and everything's a learning experience, and it just gets easier with time. So really you've just got to, I find, put yourself out there, just give it a try, see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I would agree too. I would say, like when I first started doing open mics, it was incredible how difficult it was just by myself up there on stage. But yeah, doing it over and over again. I mean, open mics are great because usually the crowd's good. So you'll get a very positive reaction. People aren't going to boo you off stage. And same with live shows. The more you do it, or the show with the whole band, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I remember when we first started, my hands were like molasses playing guitar, but eventually you just get into that rhythm and the show feels like the last show, but better, and you're just in such a rhythm that it's just fun.
Absolutely. And Bethel, from your perspective?
Yeah, I'd say that in previous times, like when I'm extremely nervous, I've like left the venue outside and like I'd pace back and forth and like re-say the poem over and over again. I don't know if that helped, but I'm like, okay, you know it, don't worry. But I also usually visit the bathroom before I hop on stage, and I just look at myself in the mirror and say, it's okay, like you got this. I find like deep breaths or like you know, having fluids to drink before, not too much or you're gonna feel like you need to pee, is good. Yeah, it's weird because I feel like my nervousness changes from show to show and there's no like reason why, honestly. Like sometimes I'll just be in this really chill cafe and I'm like super nervous. And my bandmate's like, what are you doing? We've done this at like 100 times. Like, why do you look so nervous and spaced out? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's the number one thing that I realized is like the minute I'm on stage, it kind of goes away when I first get into like halfway of my first song and then start really like getting comfortable on stage. But my issue is like I have a lot of anxiety like right before I go on. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that's really interesting that you mentioned that. Like the deep breathing is super important. And I think the atmosphere has a huge effect that people don't really think about, because I've had lots of artists say for some reason this small cafe is more intimidating than a large venue with like, you know, where you can barely see the crowd and it's very dark and everyone's kind of in the back and you can't see them. I totally agree with that. Now I'm curious to know about what you guys think about social media, because social media has a huge effect on our generation, of course. So do you think social media nowadays is having a positive effect or a negative effect towards fear and anxiety?
I think it can have, it's like obviously both, but I find that a lot of what's happening with social media is a lot of artists comparing themselves to others, and seeing this person's doing this thing, why am I not doing that thing? And then it can just kind of feed into that whole like pressure of being an artist and fear of maybe not performing the way you want to and things like that. But then obviously I feel like there's also positive aspects to it, because you can get like so much inspiration and just connect with people and all of those things. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a bit of both, I find.
Yeah. And Leigh, is your band on social media, like Instagram and Facebook, all kind of that?
We're on Facebook and Twitter right now.
Okay.
I've been talking with a marketing consultant. Well, it's a friend who has a marketing company, so we're figuring out how to better make use of social media. For me, I agree with Ange. Like, it's easy to compare yourself to other artists and say, oh, they've got more likes, or their posts are getting more likes. What are they doing? They're similar artists. We look like we're as good as they are. We played with
Yeah.
them and we're as good as they are. So it's hard to see that, I guess, especially when you're criticizing yourself. In a band like us, where the art is really important, so we're really putting everything that we are out there when we play. But I think just sitting back and reframing it and saying, yeah, what can I learn from these people who have more success in these different areas?
Yeah.
It's not about what am I doing wrong, it's about what can I learn. That's kind of how I
Yeah.
try to see it.
That's really cool. I really love that. What can I learn? I think a lot of people, if they just took a second on either social media and they just kind of paused and said, okay, this person's doing great. And what can I, like you said, what can I learn from them? Or what can I be inspired from them? That's really cool. And Bethel, kind of, what's your opinion on social media with art?
I obviously have found it a great avenue to find artists and to promote my show. I find like Instagram is my favorite platform for it.
Yeah.
But fear and anxiety, I feel like, will exist naturally. You kind of just have to like unlearn it. It's like, these platforms are made to always like make us feel almost like stressed or on edge, or make us feel some type of way, because like everything is really constructed on it. And I think that it's like reminding yourself that everything that people post and stuff is constructed. It was like made to look good in a way, right? And you could compare yourself. Like, I've seen other bands and I'm like, oh my god, they have so many followers, or there's so many this. But if you get lost in that, like, you'll forget what makes yours unique and good. And like, you don't know what's behind those followers or whatever, and it's not what you should compare yourself to. So I think it's just reminding yourself that everyone's on their own journey, and just because someone has like 10,000 followers now, it doesn't really mean anything.
Absolutely.
Everyone's on their own journey.
Totally. And you'd be surprised how many people I've seen that have 10,000 followers that I realize have bots on their account. I'm like, oh, how sad.
When you go and they have like 2 comments on their post and you're like, okay,
this
not
is
real followers.
Yeah, which I get the appeal of having the most followers, but yeah, like you said, like I think there's more to it than the amount of followers you have. And if you're lost kind of in that translation of like, I have this many followers but my art is just mediocre, or I don't even enjoy my own art, then that's kind of, I think, where people can get lost for sure. I'm
I
curious.
would hate to be in that situation where you don't enjoy your own art as a person.
Well, yeah, right?
What are you doing this for, really?
A waste of time, absolutely. I'm curious to know what your guys's, rather than your best piece of advice you received about fear, I'm curious to know what's the worst advice you've ever been given about fear that was completely not helpful in the situation where you were fearful or anxious. What was something someone said to you that didn't help, or that you thought was just a really bad piece of advice?
That's a hard question, actually.
Yeah.
I don't usually get advice like you're talking, say, before a show or something.
Something like that, yeah. Or if it's not the worst, what is maybe the best advice you've been given before?
I can go first with the worst advice.
Sure.
And it's not like a direct advice, if that makes sense, but it was more like this lack of support. So like when we first hosted Raw Voices at our first venue before that venue shut down, the manager was like pretty mean. And I'd have to like go every month and pretty much like fight for the show. And he was pretty much telling us like we shouldn't do it anymore. And it was like useless and kind of just like give up on it. And I think that like now that they're shut down, like I told him his business model wasn't good and he was all about like the money and he didn't even have menus. There was just like a huge shit show. Sorry, pardon my language. But I think, I think that in general, like the worst advice someone can give you, especially like first he was like trying to instill fear in me and trying to like make him like fear me. So like his advice wasn't about fear, but he was like instilling fear and like his advice was pretty much like give up on it. So I feel like that's the worst advice, is to be told like just drop it. And we obviously didn't. We kept fighting it and he still let us perform every month the day we wanted. But until they shut down, of course.
Right. Absolutely.
We knew.
Yeah. And my last kind of question for you guys is if you could give your younger self any sort of wisdom or advice, I guess, about fear and how to more overcome it easily, because obviously it's unavoidable to some extent, but what would you tell yourself to kind of encourage your younger self?
I think I would just say like it gets better with like fear and everything like that. Like it's not gonna be this terrifying the whole time. Like obviously there's always gonna be like certain nerves and anxiety and things, but you're gonna get better at this. You're gonna just get better in every way as far as your art goes. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. So yeah.
Totally.
I think one thing I'd tell my past self or past versions of my band is you're not as good as you think you are. And by that, I mean, I think when we first started, we were thinking, okay, it'll be 2 months, we'll be winning Battle of the Bands, we'll be doing this, we'll be playing festivals. That does happen to some bands. But I think where we were, our development as musicians is kind of don't let it go to your head. And through that kind of tell myself over the years for sure, but to put in even more work. Like only now I'm kind of starting to figure out the marketing stuff. It would have been nice to get a jump on that a bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bethel, what do you think?
I think that it's about don't let the idea of practicality make you lose sight of the things you're passionate about. I think for a long time I grew up being told like, you know, from adults around me or whatever, you know, you just get your university degree. Like I'm in university right now. I'm actually done my last semester this semester, but it's all about like, you know, do let your passions drive you. And like, you know, it is good to have a backup plan, sure, they say, but like I think that for people that tell you like, oh, you'll never make it as a spoken word artist or a musician, it's not about like making it. It's really just about letting your passions drive you and seeing where it takes you. Because at the end of the day, like if you never really make money out of it, all the networks and connections I made, I feel like were worth it. So
absolutely. Yeah. All right, everyone, that is actually all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for being a part of our show, Ange, Leigh, and Bethel. I'm so happy to have you guys on today.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. My name is Millie Rouge. I'm from the band Vienna, Whyte. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell button to be notified when we release all of our shows. We release them Monday to Friday. So I'll let you guys all say goodbye, and then we're off for the day.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.